In Luxembourg, stability is more than a foundation. It offers a platform for growth and innovation. A trusted partner for the global finance industry, Luxembourg connects markets and investors, drives cross-border investment, and fosters an environment where talent and capital converge. Luxembourg unlocks the potential of Europe's capital markets. By serving as a bridge between international capital and European opportunities, its financial centre strengthens Europe's financial ecosystem and expands its global access. Innovation drives the financial centre forward by investing in talent, embracing new asset classes and technologies, and leading in areas like digital assets, long-term investments, and private markets. Luxembourg is helping to shape a smarter, faster, and more resilient financial industry. Progress goes hand in hand with responsibility. Luxembourg is advancing sustainable finance beyond green, integrating technology and financial expertise to scale impact and mobilize capital for long-term change. This is how Luxembourg is shaping finance for our future.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a warm welcome to the Philharmonie of Luxembourg and the inaugural live Outlook 2026. My name is Judith Bogner, and once again, it's a true honor and delight to be here with you live, maybe the last time, maybe the next one will be an AI-generated hologram. But for now, I'm here in the flesh, and so are you, and we're going to talk about the next year, what to expect for 2026. And I'm delighted to be here as your Master of Ceremony on behalf of Luxembourg for Finance. Now, we will, over the course of this evening, also invite your opinion in an interactive questions and answers session with a digital tool, and for that you need to be connected to the in-house Wi-Fi. So if I can ask you to check your smartphones, that you're connected to Philharmonie Guest, no password needed. I know mobile reception is a bit patchy here, which is good, so we don't get any phone calls. So just connect you're connected, just double check you're connected so you can join us a little bit later on. And on that note, please put your hands together to offer a warm welcome to your host for tonight, the CEO of Luxembourg for Finance, Tom Theobald.
Thank you very much, Judith. Dear Minister, dear Gilles, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, and good evening and welcome to Outlook 2026. So for the past few years, we have organized this event, which looks at the year ahead in a fully digital format. It worked remarkably well, and we will, of course, continue to organize digital conferences to reach an international audience abroad. But when I took over as CEO a bit more than a year ago now, one item on my action plan was actually quite simple. In an increasingly digital world, a financial center needs real moments of connection. So at least once a year, we thought we should come together in one room to step back, exchange perspectives, and look ahead as a community. And so we thought, what better occasion to do this than this end-of-year Outlook event at a moment when everyone's trying to make sense and figure out the trends that are shaping 2026. So tonight is special, as Judith has mentioned, because it's the first in-person edition, and I'm delighted to see so many of you here tonight in the Philharmonie. And I think this evening is about creating the right frame for the discussions that will follow, in particular for the remarks of our Minister, Gilles Roth, whom we are honored to welcome here among us, and who's also our chairman at Luxembourg for Finance. And the Minister will speak about his policy agenda and also the economic direction and for the financial center for the coming year. My task is, of course, much simpler, luckily. I just have to set the scene. So we are entering 2026 with an unusual combination of uncertainty and possibility, a mix that demands clarity of thought and also humility in forecasting. The past year, in fact, has reminded us that macro trends can shift very quickly. Geopolitics, energy markets, rates, technology, productivity dynamics all seem to be moving at different speeds. So in that context, what can an event like this do? Well, it can help us to zoom out. It can help us to reconnect the dots between global forces on the one hand and the decisions we take in Luxembourg as firms, as policymakers. And it can remind us that while the global environment is complex, our financial center's strength comes from its ability to navigate this complexity together. So let me say a few words also about tonight's program. We are extremely fortunate to be joined by someone whose work I have followed not only as an avid FT reader, but as a serial giver of Christmas gifts, our keynote speaker, Tim Harford. If you have ever received the Undercover Economist or the Data Detective from me, you will know why. Tim has a unique talent of making sense of the world, for explaining complex phenomena with clarity, wit, and importantly, evidence. Tonight he has taken on the unenviable challenge which you have given yourself of telling us how to see in the future. So after the keynote, we will continue with a panel bringing together leading voices in Luxembourg to explore what 2026 may hold for markets, for regulation, business models, and the broader economy. And before you leave tonight, after the walking dinner, we have also prepared two gifts for you. Both are made in Luxembourg, and one is actually made by the Luxembourg for Finance team itself. I will not spoil the surprise, of course, but as befits a financial center, we will have ensured sufficient liquidity. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, for your engagement throughout the year, for contributing to the dynamism of our financial center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for getting us started. And if you allow me to add, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, which was just celebrated by our American friends, I am truly grateful to be here in Luxembourg. And I say that as a frequent guest over the years and as a European, because to me, Luxembourg appears like an anchor of calm and stability. And dare I say peace in times where almost everything, everywhere, all at once, as Tom was just saying, seems to be ripe for disruption. So how does Luxembourg thrive in this landscape of disruption? Well, our first keynote speaker will be delighted to speak to that question. Please put your hands together to welcome Luxembourg's very own Minister of Finance, Gilles Roth.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear Tom, dear panelists and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. The year is drawing to a close. A good time is to look back on the past year, and above all, it is an opportunity to look ahead to the year 2026. That is what you will be doing this evening. And I would like to start by saying that we can do so with cautious optimism. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the Philharmonie this evening and to the first edition of Outlook on 2026 by Luxembourg for Finance. Tonight, my speech's theme is simple, and it's also a good leitmotif for 2026, connecting stability with opportunity. Few places symbolizes this better than Luxembourg. A small country with a large responsibility, we live in a world of shocks and shifts, persistent war on our continent and beyond, great power rivalries continuing, trade tensions mixed with new industrial policies, fragmentation in global finance. At the same time, we have the transition to net zero, the digital revolution and demographic changes that are reshaping our economies. They bring new risks, but also new opportunities. I have already said this at the IMF in Washington. The glass is not half empty, but half full. And we cannot just wait for 2026. We must work on our future and on ourselves. That is exactly what we are doing in Luxembourg. We are doing our homework and first and foremost ensuring stability here at home. In such a world, stability is not a luxury. I believe that it is a strategic asset. Luxembourg is proud to be one of only a few countries that still hold a AAA rating from all major agencies. And with our 2026 budget growing together, we want to keep it that way. Our public finances remain sound. Our debt is low by international standards. Our institutions are predictable. Our rules are clear. This stability underpins a financial center that punches far above its local footprint. The sector dominates our country's wealth, growth, and tax revenues. More than 73,000 people work in finance here directly, and the same amount again indirectly. This is almost 150,000 jobs relying on finance just here in Luxembourg. But we are a global hub. In asset management, for example, around 7.3 trillion euros are managed in funds which are sold in more than 80 countries. Even in a volatile environment such as this year, Luxembourg funds have continued to attract strong net inflows. Investors are voting for their feet. They are choosing stability. They are choosing openness. They are choosing Luxembourg as their bridge to opportunity. As a government, we have tried to earn that trust, because stability does not being static, quite the opposite, in fact. Over the last 2 years, we have been very active and we have delivered. We have taken targeted pro-competitiveness measures for people and also for our financial center. We have cut the corporate income tax rate by 1 percentage point to strengthen our own attractiveness, and we will cut it again for 2027. We abolished the subscription tax on all ETFs to support our fund domicile. We introduced a more attractive tax regime for highly qualified expatriates and modernized the profit-sharing bonus, helping you to attract and also to retain talent. We launched a Sustainable Finance Action Plan, and we launched also a joint action plan for start-ups and scale-ups with the Ministry of Finance and Economy. We issued our first digital treasury certificates on a blockchain platform. This shows that digital finance is a reality of sovereign funding. They are practical steps that make Luxembourg a little more competitive, a little more innovative, and a little more future-proof. Ladies and gentlemen, stability alone is not enough to get off to a good start in 2026. It must be connected to something, to ideas, to innovation, to the real economy, and to real people too. This is where our financial center has a special role. By design, finance is a powerful connector between savers and investors, between Europe and the world, between markets and also real projects. When thinking of the year ahead, it is difficult to predict, but I can assure you that we need to finance Europe's competitiveness in a more fragmented world, accelerate the green transition, develop digital assets and also cyber resilience, and make our financial system more inclusive so that all citizens see the benefits of this change. Here again, Luxembourg is well placed. Our toolbox supports everything. Our capital markets connect all continents. Our insurance industry is deeply embedded in global risks. And our fintech and digital ecosystem is maturing fast. Digitalization is at the heart of this. It has been changing everything. Artificial intelligence will accelerate this shift even further. Our job in government is not to predict every technology. It is to ensure that our framework remains clear, fair, and innovation-friendly. And to summarize this part of my speech, in Luxembourg, we have the ingredients for the future: stability, macroeconomic, regulatory, and also political. innovation, sustainable finance to digital assets, connectivity to Europe, to international investors and to major financial hubs across the globe. Talent, a multilingual workforce used to cross-border complexity, and a strong culture of public-private partnerships with actors like Luxembourg for finance, bringing us together. Looking ahead at 2026, I know that there will be some reforms. First, a major tax reform for citizens. We are preparing a move towards a uniform tax class. That means tax relief, predictability, simplification, and a system that better reflects today's family realities. The objective is straightforward: more fairness for all families, while preserving our competitiveness. Second, a pension reform. We are taking the first steps to secure the sustainability of our system for the next generation. This was not an easy decision. It will mean grateful adjustments in contributions and retirement choices and better incentives to stay active longer. Third, the toolbox for investment and innovation. We will finalize and implement a modern carried interest regime so that we can compete with other leading fund hubs to support climbing the value chain in financial services. We will hopefully also roll out a new stock options framework for employees in startups, a first step. Together, these measures are designed to keep talent, capital, and ideas here in Luxembourg. But we also know that we cannot do this alone. Developing our financial center is and will remain a national priority in 2026. It is also a shared priority with the sector. The Haut Comité de la Place Financière, the HCPF, is a key ally in this work. It brings together government, industry, lawyers, and leaders to recommend new reforms and also ideas, and when we decide what we can implement and how. There is so much to do. Competition is intense. The agenda is full. But when I look at you and at this community, I'm confident. With this ecosystem and with this culture of collaboration, I believe that we can once again deliver on our ambitions in 2026. We can turn uncertainty into opportunity. We can make our financial center even stronger, more innovative, and also more sustainable. So, let us work together, public, private, local, and international. Let us, as our national motto says, making it happen. For me, the scene of 2026 is clear. The global outlook is uncertain, but not hopeless. If I read the signs of the horizon correctly, possibly also with hope for peace in Ukraine. The European outlook is challenging, but not static. Europe has understood that it must take action, and the Luxembourg outlook is cautious but optimistic. That is why connecting stability with opportunity matters so much. If we seize these opportunities together on the basis of strengthened stability, I'm confident about the year 2026. And with this in mind, I wish us all a peaceful Christmas season and a great evening to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Roth. You just said looking ahead into the next year is a challenging undertaking. We will try nonetheless. So please put your hands together to welcome to the stage our panel speakers, Merite Clausen, Lise Marie Barnes, and Claude Max. Perfect. Yes, thank you. Excellent. Wonderful, you all settled in. We have water here. Brilliant. So Minister Roth very kindly already reminded us, and also Tom, of some of the headwinds that we had over the course of this year that financial institutions and investors had to be dealing with. So we want to look ahead now into 2026. You are well plugged into the markets. You've seen lots of investment going into AI. There's been a boom in credit. There has been a boom in a problem in cybersecurity. Remember the Jaguar Land Rover hack that's costing the UK economy almost £2 billion. And there are all sorts of risks that investors have been dealing with this year that will carry over into next year. So we would like you to answer now the first question of our interactive audience session. If you could bring up the QR code and have you scan that with your camera. I see many people here in the room already know how to do that. Just scan it and then go straight to the Slido poll and answer the first question. And that is, what do you see as biggest risk for financial markets next year? Here we have it. It's a little bit small if you look at it at the screen. We should have it here as well, and I need my glasses for that. And you're allowed to choose two. Just giving it a bit of a second for everyone to put in their votes for the two biggest risks. And I see geopolitics and policy risk, including trade and tariff, is a strong favorite. We'll have probably 200, 250 people in the room. Let's give it a bit more time. Okay, so we're settling for geopolitical risk as number one. And then AI bubble risk for number two. Clearly, many people in the room know that the surge in stock markets in the US is driven by a lot of AI-related investment. Okay. All right, let's move on to the second question. That's a bit more juicy if you're based here in Luxembourg, because it's about which of these, if we could switch to the next poll question, which of these ongoing initiatives will offer the greatest opportunities for financial services in Europe in 2026. And here you need to weigh the options that are on your screen. Which one you feel is most promising? Is it regulatory simplification and harmonization across member states? Accelerating work on the SIU and mobilizing private capital? Is it financing the green and sustainable transition at scale? Is it investing in innovation and building out those European champions? Is it reinforcing Europe's strategic autonomy and resilience in critical supply chains and infrastructure? Or is it scaling payments, e-money, crypto, and digital assets across Europe? Interesting. Still moving, numbers still moving. So a lot of trust here in the room on simplification. And then strategic investment, okay? That's 19, okay. Okay, some food for thought for our panel. If you allow me to introduce our brilliant panel speakers. We have to my left, someone everyone knows here in the room, of course, Claude Marx, head of the Luxembourg Regulator, coming up for his 10-year anniversary, if I'm well informed, Claude. And of course, also sitting on the board of the supervisors of ESMA. Then, to your left, we have Merite Clausen. Merite, you had a distinguished career within the European Commission in DG GROW and DG ECFIN. Most recently at DG GROW as Director of Investment, working very closely with those entrepreneurs, startups, SMEs. But since the beginning of this year, you're the Deputy Chief Executive at the European Investment Fund. So looking back there on your first year. And then over On the far left, Lisa Marie Barnes, speaking here for the insurance and reinsurance industry in her capacity as CFO of P&C Reinsurance for Swiss Re, and also as CEO of, or country president for Luxembourg at Swiss Re. So good to have you all with you. And if I may start over with, to the far left with you, Lisa Marie. We've been seeing people opting for geopolitics as a very strong risk for next year. So if you're looking at the reinsurance industry as long-term investors looking for certain investment calls and navigating those geopolitical headwinds in their portfolio strategy for next year and beyond, what do you focus on?
Yeah, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you very much. Very important, and as an institutional investor, it's obviously very important for us during times of this to really look at diversification of our portfolio. And by that, we look across different regions, across different asset classes, but really to reduce concentration risk. It's also very important for us during times like this to consider all scenarios. You know, in times of uncertainty, we look at, stagflation, global recession, and really stress this on our different portfolios. It's also important for us really to explore, different asset classes and make sure that we make the right choices during times like this. Clearly, for the health and life insurance industry, the current environment of yields is a tailwind that helps the life part, but not the entire insurance industry. And it's very important for us during this time to really look at how we manage capital, but also how we really layer our risk transfer and help to mitigate our portfolios accordingly.
Could you speak a little bit more to risk? Which risks are you most concerned about? Also bearing in mind the nature and climate-related events that we've been seeing just now in Southeast Asia and in Thailand.
Sure, obviously being in the business of risk, this is what we do and helping to make the world more resilient. In times like this, where it's very uncertain with a lot of things to think about, it's not easy to navigate on what we look at and what we prioritize. Swiss Re actually published our annual outlook for 26-27, and we called it Shifting Sands. And it's symbolic of an environment where we see very significant regime shifts happening right now. And it's important for us to understand how this symbolic shifting sands will make the world around us change over the coming years. So clearly the geopolitical environment is a key risk for us. We need to understand how things like asset seizure risk, market fragmentation, political polarization, social unrest, how does it work? What does it mean for us in terms of navigating this global risk environment? And as you just mentioned, in terms of natural catastrophes, this is clearly a big risk and a continued focus area for us as insurance and reinsurance. If we just reflect, over the last 5 years, we had every year global natural catastrophe losses exceeding 100 billion. Now for the first half of 26, we already stand at the second costliest half year for the insurance industry ever, driven by 2 events, the wildfires in the US, and we've seen extreme weather in the US, as the wildfires in LA and the extreme weather in the US. But we also see, second half of 26 might seem not that busy, but in actual fact, secondary perils is playing a very, very significant role. So we see an increase in natural catastrophes around us. And this has a big implication for us, and we need to really stay close to the frequency and severity of these events. But it's not just actually the events. Mitigation is very important. And this is where we need to work between private and public partnerships to really address this. Very, very significant. And the last one that's probably worth mentioning that's really on our radar is increased litigation or legal liability inflation. This is something that's very active in the US, and we actually see that developing in advanced markets like the EU. And this topic is significant because we see that things like litigation funding being increasingly encouraged, legal action or regulatory environment actually allowing for more uncertainty in terms of what can be litigated, that will increase. This very significant. And we need to monitor this because that could have significant impacts for different economies and societies.
Thank you,
Just to
Lisa
mention
Marie.
a few.
Merit, if I may continue with you. You just saw in our second poll that in the audience there is, the run-up was reinforcing Europe's strategic autonomy and resilience in critical supply chains and infrastructure is seen as second best opportunity for financial services companies in Europe. And of course, the EIF is a key enabler of investment in support of Europe's competitiveness and resilience, as we heard earlier from the Minister. This is the homework that Europe has to undertake. Can you give us an idea, looking ahead, what the EIF is focusing on? And also maybe say a couple of words about the slight shift in strategy you've had in regards to defense.
Okay, thanks a lot, Judith. And like you, I'm also very happy that we're here in Luxembourg, that the EIF, part of the EIB group, has its headquarters in Luxembourg, because it's a country that is really a leading financial hub. And it's also a very strong supporter of the European Union project and its institutions. At the EIF, we are looking forward, well, we're looking back at a year that was extremely busy. We have, now by the end of the year, we will have reached some 16 billion worth of financing to the companies in Europe. Our financing is based on our business model, which is an intermediated model. So we work together with financial institutions, giving them guarantees so that they can support small and medium-sized companies in the member states. And we also support venture capital funds, private equity funds, infrastructure funds. So this is the way that it's part of our philosophy, because we want to build up ecosystems. We want to build up the ecosystems.
And compete with those champions that we see in the US.
Exactly. That is what we see, that it's difficult to start up. We are becoming much better in Europe at supporting the startups, both with finance and other types of support. But once that they want to grow and become international, even global companies, there is a lack of financing for that scaling up phase. And that is one of the things that we also want to focus on going forward even more, this second valley of death that has been dubbed. And what we are focusing on is to match the size of the funds that we see on the other side of the Atlantic. Because we see that companies, when they reach the phase where they have to raise maybe 300, 400, or 500 million in order to fuel their growth, they choose to go to the other side of the Atlantic or elsewhere, but they lack the financing here in Europe. And as part of our ecosystems building philosophy, we want to give a nudge to the size of funds, of venture capital funds in particular, but also other types of funds in Europe that are able to provide this type of financing, so that many more of these tech champions, if you will, because it's often about innovation and new technologies, and that's why they have these great financing needs, that they can stay in Europe and that they have the access to finance. We have set up what we call the European Tech Champions Initiative, which is about exactly that. It's about creating mega funds. And when we come in as a public VC investor, we can also attract other investors and make the growth make these funds reach their target size of 800, 900, or above 1 billion euros. And those are the type of companies or funds that can support the companies with the great financing needs and give them the big tickets. We are investing in funds in Europe, and we are investing in funds that invest in companies in Europe as a priority, because that's where we see our role as the EU's investment bank and the EU's investment fund.
Okay, Claude, if I move over to you. So, in the current geopolitical climate, you're coming from the perspective as the regulator. What is your view on emerging risks? Is the digital revolution a blessing or a risk? And of course, looming large, and it was one of the results in the first audience poll. Is there an AI bubble that you and your colleagues sitting in ESMA and be around the world might be worried about. I'm saying that in this way because there have been mutterings, say for Bank of England and IMF, about a credit bubble in certain places in regards to AI, for example.
Mm-hmm. It's a whole program, huh? In geopolitics, I think that is something that definitely needs to be factored in by financial service providers today. And I would say that from a strategic point of view, all board of directors should be worried about the geopolitical situation that has certain risks in it. Like, selecting the geography in which you are working, but also over-dependency on one specific region when it comes to IT supply and so on. So, especially since the beginning of this year, this should be something that is factored in. Cybersecurity is probably the biggest single risk stemming from the geopolitical situation, because today we see cyber attacks, but we see state-sponsored cyber attacks. And I'm naming no state, but you can recognize what I mean. And we haven't seen anything yet. We have seen tests, but we will see bigger attacks. So I think that is the big point of attention. And you mentioned AI. Is AI a blessing or is AI a risk? I think AI is both a blessing and a risk, but I think that question is more or less not so relevant in the sense that everybody should invest in AI, should embrace AI as a revolution, just as we have seen, computers coming up, as we have seen the internet, and AI is going to stay. So it is a question of managing the risks. But if you don't embrace AI, you will disappear. So I think from that perspective, from where I sit, it is more about embracing it very early, guiding the market as to what to do. And that's what we've done in 2018. So 4 years before generative AI became mainstream, we have issued guidelines to the market in the form of a white book on how to safely use AI in finance. And we've had endless meetings with actors, on how to do it. And that's the Luxembourg way of doing it. And I think that we should continue that way. Then you ask, is there a risk of a bubble? I think in AI, what we are seeing now is a little bit of the productivity paradox that we have seen a few decades ago, and there was even a US Nobel Prize winner, Robert Solow, who talked about the productivity paradox of IT. And the idea here is, what he actually said is, I see computer age everywhere except in the productivity statistics. And I think you could apply this today by saying, I see AI everywhere except in the productivity statistics. And that was in the 70s. In the 80s, it was very true. Then from the 90s, you saw that there were indeed some productivity gains. And we will have exactly the same situation with AI. Obviously, when you look at certain AI actors, from the outset, it looks like the perfect digital Swiss knife. AI is taking care of everything, and you have one big player that provides a platform that looks after everything. The reality is that you have a few very largely known big players that are in that space, that have a vertical integration from infrastructure to software solutions to use case solutions, but you also have a very scattered patchwork of smaller suppliers that look at bespoke solutions for use cases per industry, per geography, or per whatever. And I think that, when you talk about the bubble, you probably mean some of these very large players. If you look at OpenAI, I think the partners of OpenAI today have a debt load of $96 billion. They have committed to invest 1,400 billion, so $1.4 trillion into computer power, into energy, and so on to keep going. And yet the best forecast of their revenue is to make 200 billion in 2030. So you can wonder, how does that model work?
Yeah.
And I think there will companies that will have an issue with their finance. But we've seen the dot-com bubble burst in the years 2000, and yet the internet and internet age and applications are still there. We are going to see the bubble burst here for some companies that just are over the top, but AI is there to stay, so you'd better plan based on this. A final word, because you asked about the emerging risk. I think one of the risks that I see from where I sit today is not having enough talent in digital space at a very senior level. And I mean the board level, I mean the C-suite level.
With true understanding.
Finance is going to be about digital and about technology, and you need a couple of people with a computer background at that senior level. And also you need to train your staff in a really serious way about how to use AI also to mitigate risks.
Lisa Marie, how does Swiss Re, how do insurers look at AI investment and AI as in their own house?
So maybe a few comments about AI in our industry. So the reinsurance industry is actually a business where 80 to 90% of what we do is in files, claims files, contract form, etc. So this is truly transformative for us, and it's really important to remain competitive. So we see it as very transformative for our industry. It clearly comes with opportunity in terms of interactions with clients, claims handling, many things. It also comes with very significant risks. If we think about cyber, concentration risk, liability exposures, these are key themes for us as an industry. And if we talk about emerging risk, as Claude has mentioned, we clearly see for us analyzing data centers right now relating to AI. If we think about the complex nature of the combination of AI, energy supply, life cycle, something that is new and attracting a lot of attention today with huge investments is not that fancy or new tomorrow anymore. So how do we think about life cycle, about integrated ecosystems through AI, energy supply, and business interruption with such high dependency? So this is an emerging risk that is very high on our radar, and that we think, how do we think about this? So with great opportunity comes great risk that we haven't thought through. Also the unpredictable nature of AI, impulsive decision-making, different decision-making, right? Different actions leading to liability exposures, etc. So it's a complex environment to navigate for sure.
And Mariette, I understand that AI, quantum computing, which is, I personally have an eye on when that is going to land in the mainstream, that is one of the areas of priority for the EIF going forward. Could you speak a bit to that and the other areas that you focus on?
Indeed. This is part of what we call our Tech EU program, which is a program that aims to put some 70 billion into different types of tech, different verticals of tech in the next 2 years. We look at it indeed as part also of what you were saying about resilience, about building up our capacities in Europe, building up our own sufficiencies to reduce also dependencies on the world around us. And I think if you talk about AI, I read that the International Energy Agency has estimated that the consumption of electricity for data centers globally would, by 2030, amount to something like the whole consumption of a country the size of Japan. And clearly this is something that we need to make sure that we have around AI, that we have the infrastructure in Europe that is something that others cannot shut off, let's say, and also that that it is connected to data centers, and that we have the capacity to test big models, that our corporates can test big models, that our universities can use them, and so on. And this is a part also of our thinking on how to build up the resilience in Europe. When it comes more specifically to the EAF, we can do this via infrastructure funds. And just coming back also to your question about defense, because this is of course also very closely related, we are investing into funds, and we see that there are emerging funds now in the defense area. So funds that either are dedicated to supporting companies that are in the defense and cybersecurity and resilience sectors. And we also see that many funds are now interested in at least dedicating a part of their activities to this. And we work, again, as part of our ecosystems building philosophy, we work with the teams that maybe have experience from other types of venture capital, but not yet moving into this space. And we are supporting them with dedicated instruments so that they can develop their investment strategies in this particular area.
What I'm hearing is the take-up is very good, but of course it takes time.
It has had very good traction indeed. Yeah. What we hear also from the companies, in particular the smaller companies in the sector, is that it's difficult for them to get access to venture capital before they have had actual contracts, typically from government or government agencies in the defense space. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, and this is not something that we, of course, can help them with as such. But I think it's very important here also that the European Commission is coming out with new initiatives. There was a recent defense industrial transition roadmap put forward to give also the smaller companies better access to contracts that will help them build up their track record so that they can be invested into by VC and other.
I'd love to pivot now to an area I know, Claude, is dear to your heart, and that's payment ecosystem and digital assets. Luxembourg obviously has been leading the way. Minister Roth highlighted some of the initiatives, setting rules for e-money and euro stablecoin, European white passport being, of course, particularly attractive. Now, meanwhile, there are also talks about the ECB's plan, about the digital euro. They are taking shape. Maybe something will emerge next year, the year after. So how do you see the space evolving?
I think that as AI is something that is not just a temporary, hype, tokenization is the big next thing in finance. And so tokenization of assets is there to stay. The take-up may be a little bit slow because from a technical point of view, it is difficult to achieve, and finance is about trust and it's about certainty. And there are still some little pieces missing for it to really progress and be a breakthrough. And, one of the pieces that is missing is a solid regulatory framework around tokenization and the blockchain. And I think here in Luxembourg we are quite fortunate to have 4 blockchain laws that provide this certainty and that had been widely noticed beyond the borders of the European Union, from Asia to the Americas. It is something that is very important. The other point that needs to be resolved from a technical point of view is interoperability, and we are not there yet, but people are working on it. I have just attended the Singapore FinTech Festival where, interoperability was one of the key themes throughout the whole conference, and that is where, a lot of energy is being put now. And then there is a third thing that obviously you need to settle on a blockchain, which is what you refer to the central bank digital currency or stable coins. You have those 2 options. And I think here that, we are, for the moment, having a situation where in the United States, a political decision was made not to have the digital dollar, but only to go for stable coins. We take note of that. In Europe, we will have, at least on a wholesale basis, we will have CBDC, so we will have a digital euro, but it's not there. And in the meantime, people are doing bond issues through the blockchain. They are starting to look at transferring fund units through the blockchain, and you need a digital currency to settle. So the only option left is to use stablecoins. And what we see now is, initiatives of European banks to really come together and to issue their own stablecoins, euro-denominated. Today we have the situation that 99% of stablecoins around the world are US dollar denominated.
Exactly, yeah.
And not euro-denominated. And so we need euro-denominated stablecoins. The world is moving towards creating real stablecoins, because what is not so known is that a couple of hundred stablecoins have disappeared, so they have not been so stable, and also several hundred stablecoins have been unpacked from the currency, the fiat currency that was supposed to cover those stablecoins. So we need to move to give legal certainty to make it a real currency. There are efforts on the way, also led by the Basel Committee and others, the Bank of International Settlements, on how that could be achieved. The wholesale euro is being done. From a technical point of view, the ECB says it's ready, but it's not there, and we need it. So I think the question now is not, are stable coins a good thing or a bad thing? I think we need to make sure that we have a digital currency in whatever form in Europe, in the system, to be able to progress also on tokenization and transfer through the blockchain. There are risks associated with the massive use of US-denominated stablecoins, obviously. You have the risk of cutting funding of EU banks. If all of a sudden EU deposits held in EU banks move to buy US-denominated stablecoins, well, that creates an issue for the funding model of banks. You also have a macro risk of financial stability, because all these US-denominated stablecoins are pegged against either US Treasury bonds or the US dollar. If you have a run tomorrow on stablecoins, well, that will impact, on a macro level, financial stability when it comes to banks, but also money markets, both in the US and in Europe. So I think this is a space to watch, but fundamentally, the technology is there to stay. It will be massive, and we will need a digital currency to settle.
I'm going to come to you in just a second, Elise Marie and Merit, but I need to get something in for Claude, because it's going to be probably published tomorrow, the first detailed plans of the European Commission for the SIU. There has been a big debate in Europe about, do we need one single regulator? Do we need one single European stock exchange? So if this SIU, which is the reincarnation of the CMU, is supposed to be fit for purpose, what do you think needs to happen?
First of all, there's no question we need the SIU. We needed the CMU. It hasn't worked, but we need the SIU. Why we need the SIU? Because we need to find private finance to finance the digital transition, to finance the green transition. That I was very interested to read in the poll that, that's off the radar screen now, green transition. But also we need to finance defense. And you talk about multiple thousands of billion, euros need of financing. So we need the public finance can't do it alone. I know we have a very able finance minister in Luxembourg, but there is not enough public money, not in Luxembourg and not elsewhere in the European Union. We need private money. So the SIU, we need to achieve it. There have been many good ideas floated by Enrico Letta, by Mario Draghi, by Noyer. and others, and some are more useful than others, I should say. And I think I would focus on the low-hanging fruits, the short and medium-term achievable things. And then within the catalog, you have things that will never come about, that would be useful to have for SIU, but we will never have. Tax harmonization in Europe. We've been talking about that for 50 years, and it will not come in the next 50 years.
But so I know you as an optimist.
We should forget about that, but there is enough good stuff in there and good initiatives that will really push the SIU and make it a success.
Yeah.
And you know, Luxembourg is to gain from the SIU because Luxembourg is about cross-border markets. It has a very small local market. It's all cross-border. So the better success the SIU is, the better it is for Luxembourg, for its fund industry, and so on. I think two ideas are prominent here that will make a difference. One is a simple savings product. And here our finance minister, together with a few other finance ministers in Europe, has really launched this initiative. You need a simple product with tax advantages, with massive advertisement, and also financial education so that people understand a little bit what they are buying, and that will be a success. There are examples in Sweden with the ISK product and in other countries where this has worked. Number two is the second pillar pension schemes. You know, all countries have a first pillar pension financing issue, and the solution here is the second pillar. And when you look to Holland, to Denmark, to Sweden, and some other countries who have pumped money into those mandatory second pillar or quasi-mandatory second pillar schemes, again, there's massive opportunities to pump money into the real economy that way. And to answer your point on a single regulator, you know, it is the theme of the day. It is popular. Today I read in the FT another article of one of my supervisor colleagues, you know, promoting single regulator. I think, first of all, from a practical point of view, it's a fantasy because, you know, imagine controlling all financial products in Europe through a single regulator. Needs to talk 30 languages because we have more than 27 languages in Europe, needs to work by local customs, and so on and so on. So that's difficult. Do we need it? Do we have a problem to resolve? No. It's going to be very expensive. It's going to be very bureaucratic. And if you sound the market, and there have been, you know, a pharma polls, we sound the market, other regulators sound the market, nobody wants a single regulator, and nobody thinks that a single regulator will be added value for the SIU. So I think we need to put this a little bit in perspective. There are aspects within this thinking that are needed. Regulatory convergence we need. So we need regulation and not directives that are transposed differently. We need certain common standards that are there, but we have guidelines at ESA level. We have lots of instruments to achieve this. So I wouldn't overrate this. There is one area in the finance world where we need to do something, and that's reporting. You know, for an asset manager who works in 6 or 8 different countries in the European Union, it's a headache to have different reporting in different countries. But we can achieve convergence there through the ESAs. We don't need, you know, anything special. We can do it easily. So yes, I am an optimist. I think it's an opportunity for Luxembourg, and we shouldn't be distracted by these, you know, ideas that sound charming, that the European SEC is going to be the solution to all problems.
Heard loud and clear, thank you. So we slowly need to wrap this up. We have Santa Claus coming soon. Lisa Marie, what would be your wish to the regulator, to the European Commission from your perspective, representing insurers and the reinsurance industry?
So maybe 2 things. The one is continuing the active dialogue across different players in the financial center. I think that's super important to all the different themes that Claude has just raised. And the second one is just clarity and stability. Uncertainty comes at a very big cost in terms of investment and significant compliance efforts. So clarity and stability and focusing on regulatory innovation and cross cooperation. I think these would be my wish list to Santa Claus.
Brilliant. Marita, same for you. Santa Claus is coming. So to enable the work that you've been describing the EIF is doing, what would be, and you have a lot of experience in terms of how the Commission works from the inside. There is hope, there is a lot of faith in the room in terms of the simplification processes, but I'm sure you have some ideas how to enable that investment and enabling the private money liquidity in a better way. What's on your wish list?
Yes, well, we already had some of our wishes come true, actually, because
Okay.
we also have a very good dialogue with the European Commission. And in the context of the capital requirements regulation, new guidance, but also the Solvency II framework with the new delegated act, we have been recognized, so to speak, as a legislative program, which means that when the EIF is invested into a fund, for instance, this means that we will get a more favorable treatment under the capital requirements, in the sense that when somebody invests with us, they may not have to put so much capital aside. And this is extremely useful, of course, also going forward, because we do want to have more collaboration with pension funds, with insurers, with corporates, with other corporate banks, with other who can help us in building up the instruments that will be able to lend in and invest into the real economy. And if I were to express one wish to Santa Claus, it might be a little bit of a mentality shift also in institutional investors, the pension funds and others, to become more open towards investing into venture capital, for instance. I know that there are obstacles, but they can to some extent be overcome also with good dialogue with the legislature and with the regulators. And I think that that's, flow of more money into the venture capital system could
Here in Europe and not in the
here in
US.
Europe, indeed, could fuel growth and job creation and all the other good things that we would like to see under the Christmas tree this year.
Thank you so much for your insight. It's been a real pleasure. A round of applause, please, for our fantastic panel speakers. Thank you. Thank you. If I may invite you to take a seat. So, taking a step back, we've been talking about making strategic decisions, thinking about how to evaluate risks going forward, looking into the next year, seeing literally into the future. What do we need in financial services to see into the future? Data. What if we don't trust the data as much as we should because it's spoiled in some way, maybe by fake news, maybe by AI hallucinations? I'm sure everyone in the room has, at this point in the year, played around with ChatGPT and DeepSeek and has experienced what that looks like. But what if no data is available because it was never inquired, because it was never gathered, because statistics or methods are out of date? And I want to give you two examples. There's a brilliant book called Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, and she makes the case that big data, economic data, for the longest time simply overlooked the needs of women, and that has a knock-on effect on how economic planning is done, how cities are built, how traffic is being developed, how bathrooms in airports are being built, and every woman in the room will know what I'm speaking about when I say they are never enough for women, because they were simply overlooked. And then last week, Paul Donovan, who's the chief economist at UBS Wealth Management, some in the room here may know him, he wrote in his blog about the hassle with the side hustle, and he meant that more and more people are developing income streams and therefore spending power, maybe through social media, maybe as a TikTok content creator that is not being picked up by your regular employment and unemployment statistic. So these are just some of the issues that our final keynote speaker is thinking about. He's a data nerd. He has been spending his whole career thinking about forecasting. He has many hats on. He is an economic journalist, he's an FT columnist, he's a BBC broadcaster, and he's the author of 10 books, including Times Book of the Year, How to Make the World Add Up, and the most latest one is a book for children, The Truth Detective. In his podcast, Cautionary Tales, he tells the story, and you can hear it in his voice that he enjoys telling that story of historic failures and what to learn from them. He has a true gift as an economic storyteller, taking those abstract economic ideas and dry data and bring it down into every world reality so everyone can understand it. In his own words, his BBC radio show, More or Less, takes the BS out of data. And for this gift, as a storyteller, as an economic journalist, he was rewarded with an OBE in the New Year Honours in 2019. He is, of course, best known under the title of his best-selling book. Please put your hands together and offer a warm welcome to the undercover economist, Tim Harford.
Your Excellencies, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for that generous introduction. After that, I'm very excited to hear what I have to say. It's a great honor to be asked to come here and address you. It's also a little bit of a puzzle. When Luxembourg for Finance said we're having a session looking forward to 2026, and we'd like you to help us make forecasts about what's coming. Of course, my reaction was, you do know I'm an economist, right? We don't really very good at forecasts. We have an incredible track record of getting them wrong. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and then I realized, well, one thing I do, as Judy said, is think about things going wrong and tell stories about things going wrong. And I thought that maybe I'd tell you a story about some forecasts going wrong. But not just a story, but as I always like to do it, a story with hopefully some lessons that we can all learn to do better in future. So the story concerns two of my favorite economists, one of whom I think needs no introduction, John Maynard Keynes, so famous that even today the economists divide themselves into the Keynesians and whatever it is the others call themselves, I lose track. But the other economist, slightly older than Keynes, they did overlap, they were contemporaries, almost rivals. He's not very well known today. He was called Irving Fisher. But Irving Fisher, in his prime, in the 1920s, 100 years ago, he was, without a doubt, the most famous economist on the planet. And among the things that linked Fisher and Keynes was their fascination with economic forecasting. Before I tell you about their forecasts, I should tell you a little bit about the men. One thing they had in common was they were remarkable, and everybody who met them said that they were remarkable. Fisher was this sort of great, strong man. He was a rower, he was a debater, prize-winning mathematician. His economics, one fellow economist said, Irving was anything between 10 years and 2 generations ahead of his time. Keynes also just wowed people whenever they met him. A Canadian diplomat called Douglas LePan once saw John Maynard Keynes give a speech, and he later wrote in his diary, "This is the most beautiful creature I have ever seen. Is he human or is he from some higher order?" I don't know if any of you are getting that feeling now, or no. Not me. Keynes. Keynes had this effect on people. So they were remarkable men. The second thing to understand about Fisher and Keynes is that they were strange men. They were unusual. So Fisher, for example, like me, was a data nerd. He was obsessed with getting as much data as possible. Unlike me, the kind of data he was interested in, well, He collected the regular stuff, such as price indices, inflation. In fact, he was a pioneer of collecting price data at a time when governments weren't really capable of collecting data on prices. Irving Fisher had an entire battery of statisticians working for him. But Fisher was interested in other things. For example, he talked about a new unit that had been developed called the CLO. The CLO measures the warming power of clothing. He would also explain how when you stood, you should stand with your feet between 7 and 8 degrees apart. This is the optimal outturn of the toes. As I say, Fisher, a strange man, and a man who passionately believed in the power of data. Keynes was a little bit different. So Keynes famously talked about financial markets as a casino, which is an interesting way for an economist to talk about them. It's not the way we economists usually talk about them. But he took his risk-taking seriously. He was fascinated by human psychology. So at one point, in 1918, with the German army camped outside Paris, Keynes heard that there was going to be a massive auction of French art masterpieces in Paris. So he went to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the British finance minister, and said, you've got to lend me some money. This is going to be an absolutely amazing opportunity to buy cheap French art. And this is 1918, okay? I mean, everybody's got other things to think about. But Keynes, being Keynes, he persuades the finance minister to give him, I think, £10,000, and then an escort, an airship and a destroyer, and they cross the channel, Keynes and the head of the National Gallery in London, in disguise, so nobody recognizes him. And when they arrive in Paris at the auction, the Germans start shelling Paris. So half the people in the auction room leave. Keynes, of course, is like, this is brilliant. This is going to be a fantastic opportunity. So they bought all this art from the National Gallery in London, rock-bottom prices. Keynes picked up a Cézanne, which I think is probably better than anything the head of the National Gallery bought. And they went back across the channel, the destroyer, the airship, and Keynes arrived back at his friend Virginia Woolf's house and said, I'm sorry, Virginia, I'm absolutely exhausted. There's a Cézanne in the hedge. Could you get one of the servants to pick it up? I'm so tired. This is the kind of person that Keynes was. So as I say, Fisher, Keynes, both unusual people. But also fascinated by investment. They weren't just ivory tower economists. They were economists who believed that their skills should enable them to make money in financial markets and beyond. So I should tell you a bit about how Fisher made his first million. He, by the way, wasn't rich. He went to Yale University, but his father died of tuberculosis the first week he was at Yale. And he supported himself, paid his fees, and supported his family by tutoring all the rich kids all around him in mathematics and economics. So he knew what it was like to be surrounded by money, but somehow not to have enough money yourself. So I said, I'll tell you how he made his first million. I recommend this strategy to anybody, by the way, no downsides. He married somebody very rich. She was called Margaret Hazard. She was the heiress to a soap detergent fortune. Anyway, Irving and Margaret, they get married. They have the wedding cake is about this big, and there are 3 ministers, and the wedding is written up in the New York Times. It's a great big thing. So that's his first million, but he doesn't stop there. He invents the Rolodex. Some of you are old enough, like me, to remember what a Rolodex was. It's what we used before filofaxes, and filofaxes are what we used before smartphones. Anyway, he invented the Rolodex. He sold the rights to the Rolodex for tens of millions of dollars in today's money to Remington Rand, the stationery company. So he's making a huge amount of money, and as I said, he used this money to develop a statistical operation gathering price data, and then he sold the price data to Wall Street. And he used all of this to launch his career as a journalist. So in newspapers across America, Irving Fisher's forecasts and Irving Fisher's data were gathered together in a syndicated page called Irving Fisher's Business Page. This is how Irving Fisher got to be the most famous economist in the world. So that's Fisher. Keynes was kind of more familiar with money. You know, his friends had money, his father's friends had money, his father had money. He's the ultimate insider. He traded currency and debt for the British Empire during the First World War. After the war, he started trading currency. He set up an early hedge fund. He raised money from all of these rich friends he had. He wrote to his father, he said, "Win or lose, this high-stakes gambling amuses me," which, by the way, I do not advise putting in your fundraising prospectus. But anyway, that was kind of how he saw the world. It was kind of fun. And here's John Maynard Keynes. Of course he's going to be able to make money trading currency. He makes an enormous amount of money trading currency. Then there's an outbreak of inflation in Germany, and he loses a lot of money trading currency. In fact, he loses all the money. Then he phones up all his friends and says, "I'm sorry I lost all the money. Can I have some more money? What's your strategy?" "My strategy is I'm John Maynard Keynes." So they give him more money and he makes it all back. So now it's the early 20s. He's made a fortune, he's lost a fortune, he's made another fortune. So now his strategy, and he's now operating on behalf of King's College, Cambridge, which is if you've ever seen photographs of Cambridge, you've seen photographs of King's College. It's the pretty one right in the middle. And he's trading, it's a centuries-old institution. He's trading on behalf of King's College, Cambridge. And his strategy now is pro and counter-cyclical investment. So all he needs to do is forecast the recessions and the booms. And whenever there's a boom, you go into the pro-cyclical stocks, and whenever there's a recession, you go into the counter-cyclical stocks. There is no fault with this strategy as long as you can predict the booms and the recessions. But of course, he's John Maynard Keynes. He knows everything. He knows everyone. He rewrote macroeconomics. He gets phone calls from the Bank of England. "Maynard? Yes, the Bank of England here. Yes, interest rates are going up tomorrow. Yes, thought you'd like to know." I mean, it wasn't actually illegal at the time, but, you know, he had an edge. He had an edge. So this is John Maynard Keynes' investment strategy. Irving Fisher, at the same time, remember, is publishing his strategy in all the newspapers. And his strategy, his investment strategy, is Irving is a technology bull. He sees these great technologies that have been developed largely in America over the previous decades. Electricity, electrification, the electric motor, the internal combustion engine, bulk processing of chemicals, the production line, the assembly line. He sees all of these technologies just reaching maturity, and he forecasts that American industry is going to go through a massive productivity boom. And his advice to investors is borrow and invest in American equities. And throughout the 1920s, American equities go up and up and up and up. I mean, it couldn't happen today, right? And everyone who's invested in American equities, especially if they've borrowed money, as Fisher advises, they're feeling pretty smart. And by 1929, Irving Fisher is standing outside his mansion in New Haven, Connecticut. His wife's father had paid for the mansion, but Irving has paid for a lavish refurbishment. And he's standing there with his son, and he's able to say to his son, "I paid for this. This is my money from my economic insight." He was proud of that. It was important to him. So, there are our two heroes, Irving Fisher, John Maynard Keynes. It's 1929. And as you all know, but they did not, they were standing on the brink of a financial precipice. The Dow Jones Industrial Average during the Wall Street crash lost 89% of its value. That's a proper bubble popping. None of this 2008 stuff. That's a real crash. And these two men, the greatest economists of their generation, they didn't see it coming. So, I promised you a story, I promised you some lessons. Lesson number one, even very smart economists who everyone thinks is brilliant make forecasting mistakes. But you didn't need me to tell you that, because, look around, right? We see this a lot. There was a wonderful little study conducted by the International Monetary Fund after the crisis of 2008. What they wanted to know is, when they looked at the consensus forecasts, all the investment banks and the World Bank and the OECD and all these forecasters, when they looked at the consensus, the average forecast, what forecast did these people make at the end of 2008 for what was going to happen to the economy in 2009? The end of 2008, remember? Lehman Brothers, some of you are too young to remember. You're so lucky. Those of us who, I used to have hair. 2008, Lehman Brothers has collapsed. Bear Stearns has collapsed. AIG has been rescued by the skin of its teeth. Stock markets around the world are collapsing. It's not a secret that there's a problem, okay? So the question is, which countries around the world will have a recession? Imagine, we could be standing, instead of December 2025, outlook on 2026, we could be standing December 2008, outlook on 2009. Is there going to be a recession? Okay? So the IMF looked at 77 countries, basically all the countries with any economic footprint at all, 77 countries. There were 49 recessions across those 77 countries in 2009. The question is, of these 49 recessions, how many did the consensus forecast of all the experts predict? You got it. 0. None. None. Although the consensus did predict 13 recessions in 2010 that didn't happen. So, So sure, lesson number one, the forecasts are often wrong, especially when it really matters, even when they're coming from the best people. But then there's another lesson. And that's about what happens when you get the forecast. So I think back to 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, I gave a talk to a group of smart people like this, and we took questions, and somebody put their hand up and said, this is the first time we've all got together since COVID. And in late 2019, we had a gathering, and we had a speaker, and the speaker was a great scientist. And he gave us this talk, and he said what really worried him was the risk of a pandemic. This is late 2019. He's really worried about a pandemic. It could spread so quickly, through air travel, global interconnected world. That was what he was worried about. So, this person is now asking me the question. He says, that was the last speaker, and that was his forecast. So what's your forecast? Can you do a good forecast like that one? Okay, thanks. So I said, I just want to ask, that speaker gave you possibly the most consequential, timely, accurate forecast you will ever receive in your life. Before I answer your question, could you answer one question for me? What did you do? And the answer, of course, was nothing. Didn't do anything. Of course he didn't do anything. What's he going to do? What's he supposed to do with a forecast like that? I'm worried about a pandemic. Oh, okay, yeah, sounds worrying. I don't know. What am I going to do? I did hear that one insurance company told me that they had looked and they had been talking about a pandemic, and they had changed their policies so that the exclusion was not just for flu, but was for any pandemic. So somebody had thought it through. It is possible. But generally, I'm like, you got the best forecast you will ever get. You didn't do anything. Why are you asking me to give you another forecast? Haven't you had enough? And there's a bigger message here. which is that we ask for forecasts, we want forecasts, we talk about forecasts, but forecasts are often, they're like snack food, they're like the Pringles of intellectual discussion. Like we like them, but we know they're not really good for us, right? So before you ask for a forecast, think about, like, what do I want to do with this? Is it just like, some chat, it's nice to talk? Or are we actually trying to learn something and think deeply and maybe take action? It's very common not to take action. You may remember, again, this is even before the financial crisis, we heard Lisa Marie Barnes talk about the impact of weather-related events and the cost of weather-related events. If you think back to 2004, a massive hurricane closed in on New Orleans. And as the hurricane got closer and closer, everybody realized, oh, this is the big one. We don't have proper levees. This hurricane is going to smash through the levees. It's going to flood New Orleans. We can't get people out. The roads are clogged. The airports are clogged. There's no shelter. There's the Superdome, but the Superdome, that's going to be a disaster. There's nothing we can do. You may remember that. If you remember that, I'm impressed, because I'm not talking about Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina was 2005. This is Hurricane Ivan. 1 year before Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina did smash the levees, did drown thousands of people, did leave everybody to be evacuated to the Superdome, which was in fact inadequate, did expose that the roads weren't enough, the airports weren't enough, there was no plan. But Hurricane Ivan did all of that 1 year earlier, and it just turned aside at the last minute. So they got their perfect forecast 1 year in advance. And you know what they did? They did what most people do. They just went, whew, that was lucky. Yeah? I'm not blaming the citizens of New Orleans. I do somewhat blame the politicians of New Orleans. I somewhat blame the federal officials. But it's very human to get a really good forecast and to do nothing. Another thing about Hurricane Katrina, after Hurricane Katrina, demand for insurance went up. Suddenly people bought hurricane insurance for a year. 3 years later, they stopped. No one's interested in hurricane insurance. So even when you get the warning, you then forget. And then there's also this weird kind of optimism. So another hurricane. So social scientists find hurricanes very interesting, how people react. So Hurricane Sandy, 2012, I think, coming in on the New Jersey coast. People were interviewed about how bad they thought Hurricane Sandy would be, and they were actually way more pessimistic than the experts. The experts were like, well, it could be bad, it's going to damage some stuff. When you talk to ordinary people, they were like, oh, this is going to be apocalyptic. And then you'd say, okay, so what are you doing? And people were like, oh no, I'm going to be fine. I'm just really worried about everybody else. So there's this weird kind of pessimism and optimism. Oh, everything's really bad, but not for me. I'll be okay. I don't need to do anything. Or maybe one thing. Maybe I'll get some water in, and that'll be fine. Yeah? Next time there's a pandemic, right? We'll buy loo paper and nothing else. Yeah? You did the one thing, it'll be fine. Okay, so lesson number 1, the forecasts, even from the experts, are often really bad. Lesson number 2, when you get a really good forecast, you're probably going to ignore it. So when you do get a forecast, or when you ask for a forecast, start asking more productive questions. A much more productive question is not what's going to happen, but what are we going to do about it if it does? Third lesson. So on April the 1st, 2013, I got an email from a psychologist called Philip Tetlock. He's one of my favorite social scientists in the world. And he wanted me to join a forecasting competition. He said he's recruiting thousands, maybe tens of thousands of forecasters, and he's going to ask them to make forecasts, and he's going to see how well they do. Now, I said to Phil, look, I'm an economist, I can't do forecasts. But I want to watch. I want to know what happens. Because Philip Tetlock had actually been doing a version of this tournament for 20 years. He's a remarkable academic. He had realized people are always making forecasts. Economists make forecasts, politicians make forecasts, journalists make forecasts, forecasts about the economy, forecasts about the weather, forecasts about wars, forecasts about political developments, elections. Everyone's always making forecasts. And everyone's always a bit vague, and they never get held to account. So Tetlock started interviewing experts and asking them to make specific forecasts with time deadlines, so you would always know, did the forecast come true or not? And he spoke initially to 300 experts, all kinds of fields, all kinds of professions, but the big picture, macroeconomic, geopolitical stuff. And at the end of his 20-year research project, he published a book called Expert Political Judgment. How good is it and how do we know? And his answer is, I have a question. Does Luxembourg have a zoo? Do you have a zoo in Luxembourg? No, okay, sorry. You'll have to go further if you want a perfect forecaster, because any orangutan can beat any expert at forecasting. You just give the orangutan darts and a dartboard that is divided into 3. So yes, no, maybe, or if you like, gets bigger, gets smaller, stays about the same. Just get the orangutan to throw darts at the dartboard. It'll do just as well as the experts. That's what he found. That we just can't do it. It's not just the economists, it's everybody in a complex world. We just can't do it. So when Tetlock approached me and said, do you want to do some forecasting? I'm like, no, you've already proved your point. It can't be done. And Tetlock said to me, no, I'm not so sure. He'd seen something in his studies that he wanted to explore more. He's a very interesting man. And so he kept going and he kept asking questions and he kept expanding his field of who he spoke to. And he published another book in 2015, I think, with the title Super Forecasting. And what Tetlock had found is there are people who can do it, but they're not generally the traditional experts. They don't usually have PhDs. They're not always working in think tanks or even in wonderful newspapers like the Financial Times. They could be anywhere. And Tetlock, being a psychologist, he was interested in the psychology of these expert forecasters, these super forecasters, he called them. These are people who, they're not perfect, but they get these big picture questions right much more often than you would expect by chance. And Tetlock said, look, what these people have got in common is, first of all, they understand some basic probability. Second, they are always trying to prove themselves wrong. So Tom mentioned forecasting with humility. This is that, but even more than that. It's almost like forecasting with paranoia. Like, of course I'm wrong. I must be wrong. Show me where I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. They were constantly tweaking their forecasts and they were constantly looking for a way to prove their own ideas were flawed. This is, I have to say, very unusual behavior. But the secret to being a super forecaster is this constant self-criticism, this relentless curiosity and open-mindedness. So that's the third lesson. What do we have? Lesson number 1, most forecasts are bad. Lesson number 2, when you make a good forecast, no one's going to listen to you anyway. Lesson number 3, you can make a good forecast, but you have to behave in a way that is not usual. You have to constantly be criticizing your own ideas. So what about lesson number 4? Well, for lesson number 4, I want to tell you what happened to Irving Fisher and John Maynard Keynes. So I told you they're these great, amazing thinkers. They'd made all this money. They were super famous. They had their forecasting strategies. And I told you that they failed to see the Wall Street crash coming. They got the biggest call wrong. But what I didn't tell you is what happened. And what happened was that Irving Fisher lost everything. His money, his reputation, everything. And John Maynard Keynes died a millionaire and the most famous economist in the world. So why? And there's a simple answer to that question. John Maynard Keynes changed his mind and changed his strategy, and Irving Fisher didn't. But that just pushes the question a bit deeper. Why did Keynes change his mind? Why did Fisher stick? And I think it's partly the situation they found themselves in. Irving Fisher, so publicly exposed, so famous, that one commentator blamed the Great Depression on the president, the Treasury Secretary, and Irving Fisher, professor at Yale. That's how famous he was. And when you're so famous and you're so committed to your forecast, it's so hard to change. A lot of people know only one thing about Irving Fisher, and that is 2 weeks before the financial crisis began, on the front page of the New York Times, he was quoted as saying, "Stocks have reached a new and permanently high plateau." Front page. It's very hard to back away from that. Keynes, on the other hand, was investing more privately for a Cambridge college. He wasn't making such public forecasts. And his strategy had been going wrong all through the 1920s. Irving Fisher had been making these leveraged bets in this rising market. He thought he was a genius. John Maynard Keynes was going, turns out I can't forecast recessions and I can't forecast booms, and maybe I need to change. And in the end, he adopted a strategy that was much more like we'd associate with a Warren Buffett kind of school of thought. Find yourself a company you really believe in, management you really trust, and hold on to that. In fact, Buffett often quotes John Maynard Keynes as one of his inspirations. Over the course of his career, John Maynard Keynes outperformed the market by an average of 6% a year over 25 years. And that's including the first 8 years rubbish. So it's a pretty amazing reward for being willing to change your mind. So it was partly about the situation that these men found themselves in, but I do think it was also about their characters. Fisher was so convinced that the data would always give him the answer, that if you analysed the world deeply enough, you'd always figure out what was going to happen. And John Maynard Keynes just thought, that's not always possible. There's a famous John Maynard Keynes quote where he's talking about interest rates in 30 years' time or the possibility of a war in Europe. He's writing in the 1930s. He says, about such questions, there's no scientific basis to form any probability whatsoever. We simply do not know. And I think realizing that some things can't be forecast gave him an advantage, a willingness to change his views. Fisher and Keynes both died shortly after the Second World War. Fisher, as I said, had lost everything, including his reputation. Keynes had reshaped the global financial system at the Bretton Woods Conference, helping to design the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the toast of the conference. Shortly before he died, he said, "My only regret in life is that I have not drunk more champagne." He's more famous for another saying, and the strange thing is, he never actually said it, but he lived it. When the facts change, I change my opinion. What do you do? That is my fourth lesson, and I just wish that John Maynard Keynes had had the chance to teach it to Irving Fisher. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for this tour de force. And I'm now wondering if some of those gold investors listened to your talk about forecasts and changed their minds. Food for thought. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Luxembourg for Finance, I thank you very much for listening. I thank all the sponsors. Your generous contribution made this event tonight possible. I join the Finance Minister in wishing you a peaceful Christmas, an enjoyable conclusion for this year, and a prosperous 2026. I can give you a heads up. If you have family or a lot of work in Asia, it'll be the year of the fire horse, starts on 17th of February, followed by the red goat, and the two together, a forecast, are known to bring a lot of deep change, if at least very dynamic activity. So there's a forecast for you to ponder. Now I propose we start the future by having a good meal and continue the conversation over something delicious to drink. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.